hate this conditioner," I muttered, scrubbing it through my hair with growing frustration. Standing in the shower, I watched the drain clog with thick, dark strands of hair, swirling in the water like something alive. My scalp prickled as I stared at it. I leaned down, gripping the mess with trembling fingers, and pulled it free. It was warm and slimy, a damp tangle that clung to my hand like seaweed. I gagged and tossed it into the trash. I scrubbed the shower floor twice that night. The thought of stray hair sticking to the tiles made my skin crawl, like bugs might follow. I'd always been a neat freak, and Paul teased me for it, but this was different. This felt personal. The next morning, I found more. I swept the bathroom obsessively, but no matter how much I cleaned, I kept finding it. Coiled around the sink drain, stuck to the bristles of my hairbrush, clumped in corners like forgotten spider webs. I started double washing my hair, convinced I wasn't rinsing properly. But every time, more strands came loose, sliding between my fingers and slapping wetly against the tub.
"It's late. Come to bed,"
he said, leaning against the bathroom door frame one evening as I wiped down the counters for the second time.
"You don't need to do all that. I could already eat off this place."
"I like it clean," I snapped, harsher than I intended. His brows knit together, but he didn't push. I sighed, forcing a small smile. "Sorry, just stressed, I guess." He stepped closer, his hands warm on my shoulders.
"And this makes it better?"
I froze under his touch, the pressure of his palms too solid against my skin. "Yeah, kinda."
"Okay, just come to bed when you're done. I have something else for you to clean."
As I lay in bed later that night, the itch started. It wasn't painful, just a light prickle at the base of my neck, like the ghost of a mosquito bite. I scratched absent-mindedly, but the sensation spread, down my back, across my arms, curling around my thighs. I scratched harder, my nails dragging against the skin, until Paul stirred beside me.
"Round 2 already?"
he teased, his voice heavy with sleep but tinged with a lazy grin. "Not tonight," I murmured with a faint laugh, trying to keep my tone light. "Go back to bed."
"Your loss,"
he mumbled, rolling over and pulling the blanket up. His breathing evened out almost instantly. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the bathroom, staring at my reflection under the stark fluorescent light. My eyes looked hollow, the shadows beneath them darker than before. My skin was pale, and my lips had lost their usual flush. And my hair. I ran my fingers through it, pulling free another handful. The strands slipped between my fingers, limp and lifeless. My stomach turned as I let them drop into the trash. Something was wrong. By the third day, the smell started. It wasn't strong at first, just faint whiffs of something sour, like spoiled milk coming from somewhere I couldn't pinpoint. I scoured the apartment, checking the fridge, the trash, even the space behind the furniture. But I found nothing. The smell lingered anyway, hanging in the air like a warning. Paul didn't seem to notice, but I did. I started showering more often, desperate to scrub it off me. I used body washes, exfoliants, anything to mask the sourness. But no matter how much I cleaned, it clung to me, burrowing into my skin. A week later, I noticed the flakes. They dusted my pillow in the morning, small and white, like ash. I thought it was dandruff, but it wasn't just my scalp. It was everywhere. My arms, my legs, even my hands. Tiny pieces of me, shedding off like old paint. I started wearing long sleeves around Paul, even at home. "It's freezing in here," I'd say, laughing nervously. He'd roll his eyes and grab a blanket, but I could feel his gaze linger, questioning. I avoided his touch, afraid he'd notice how thin my skin felt beneath his fingers. One evening, as I cleaned the bathroom for the third time that day, I found something under my fingernail. A dark speck, sharp and unyielding. I dug at it, my nail scraping against the skin until it bled, but the speck wouldn't budge. It felt fused, like it was a part of me. I covered the spot with a bandage before Paul got home, pretending it didn't happen. By the 12th day, I couldn't avoid the truth anymore. My body wasn't just betraying me, it was changing. My hair wasn't falling out in strands anymore. It came out in chunks, leaving raw patches on my scalp. My skin looked translucent under the harsh bathroom light, blue veins webbing across my arms like cracks in ice. The smell was worse now, acrid and sour, no matter how much I cleaned. I started burning candles in every room, hoping the lavender would drown it out, but it only made the contrast sharper. Paul kissed my cheek before bed one night, and I froze. His lips felt warm, sticky against my skin, and for the first time, I thought I saw him hesitate. He pulled back, his brow furrowing.
Kim,
He said softly.
what's going on?
I smiled tightly, my lips dry and cracked. Nothing, I lied. I'm fine. It was the morning of the 15th day, when I finally realized no amount of cleaning would make a difference. I just finished my 3rd shower of the day, my fingers raw and pruned from scrubbing. The water pooling at my feet carried more than just dirt. There were flecks of something darker, something soft and gray. When I bent down to inspect it, I gagged. Skin. My skin. I turned off the water and stepped out, trying not to look at the drain. The mirror was fogged over, but I couldn't bring myself to wipe it clean. I didn't want to see what stared back at me. I toweled off quickly, my hands trembling, and wrapped myself in a robe. Paul was waiting in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in his hand. He smiled when he saw me, but the look in his eyes didn't match. His gaze lingered on my face, on the scarf I'd wrapped tightly around my neck.
Still cold?
He asked, his voice light, but there was an edge of worry beneath it. Yeah. I poured myself a cup of coffee, careful to avoid his gaze. The smell of the roast, once comforting, was now bitter.
You've been in there a lot lately.
I forced a smile, the skin around my lips pulling too tight. Just trying out some new products, I said, hoping the lie would hold. That evening, while Paul worked late, I stripped the sheets from the bed to wash them. I'd been doing that more often, unable to stand the sight of the flecks and stains that appeared no matter how clean I kept things. As I pulled back the pillowcase, something wriggled beneath it. I thought it was a thread, black and fine, but then it moved. A worm, thin and slimy. It squirmed across the fabric before disappearing into the seam of the mattress. My stomach churned, and I threw the pillow to the floor, stepping back like the thing might leap at me. I grabbed the vacuum cleaner and attacked the bed with shaking hands, running the nozzle over every inch of fabric. But even as I worked, I couldn't shake the sensation that there were more. Crawling, hiding, waiting. When Paul got home, I'd already remade the bed and lit a lavender candle, the flame flickering in the corner. He kissed me on the cheek, but his lips lingered this time.
Kim, something feels off. What's going on?
He asked, his tone firm. It's nothing, really. I'm fine. By the 18th day, the smell was unbearable. It was no longer sour. It was rotten, thick and meaty, like something dead. It clung to everything. My clothes, the bed, the very walls of the apartment. Paul noticed it too, wrinkling his nose as he came home from work.
Can you smell that?
He asked, dropping his keys onto the counter. I don't smell anything, I said quickly, my back to him as I scrubbed the dishes. My fingers moved faster, scouring a plate that was already spotless.
It's really bad.
He said, stepping into the living room.
It smells of death. Maybe something's in the vents?
He didn't say more, but I caught the way his eyes flicked toward me, the brief hesitation in his step. He thought it was me. I could see it in his face. My grip tightened on the sponge, and I scrubbed harder, and ignoring the way he lingered near the doorway, before finally sitting beside me that night. On the 20th day, I woke to the sensation of something wriggling beneath my skin. It wasn't the itch I'd grown used to. It was movement, deliberate and slow. I shot upright in bed, clawing at my arm as though I could dig it out. My nails left red welts across my skin, and Paul stirred beside me.
Kim?
His voice was thick with sleep. his hand fumbling toward mine. I recoiled before his fingers could touch me. "It's nothing," tossing the blanket aside as I stumbled toward the bathroom. The lights were unforgiving, casting a cold glow over the pale, papery skin of my arm. I held my wrist under the faucet, cool water trickling over it, but I couldn't stop trembling. My chest tightened as I pressed down, hard on the spot where I'd felt the movement. Something gave way beneath the pressure, and then it burst. A bead of thick, yellow pus oozed out, followed by a tiny black speck. My stomach churned, and I gripped the edge of the sink to steady myself, bile rising in my throat. The door creaked open, and Paul's voice was tense, a mix of irritation and unease.
"What the hell is going on? You're freaking me out."
I turned to him, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. "It's nothing, just a rash." His eyes darkened, a storm of fear and frustration crossing his face.
"Don't give me that. You're not okay, and we both know it."
That night, Paul cornered me in the kitchen. I sat stiffly across from him at the table, my scarf wound tight around my neck, my hands buried in my lap. The faint flicker of the overhead light felt like a spotlight I couldn't escape.
"You're not yourself. You barely sleep. You're always locked in the bathroom and—"
He hesitated, his nose wrinkling.
"That smell. It's gotten worse. Something's wrong, and you're keeping it from me."
I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. My throat felt dry, raw, like it had been scraped clean. I clenched my fists beneath the table, my nails digging into the soft flesh of my palms.
"Let me in,"
he said softly, leaning forward, his hand stretching out toward me.
"Please. Let me help you."
The movement was reflexive, immediate. I yanked my hands back, my chair scraping loudly against the floor as I recoiled. His hand hovered in the space between us for a moment, then dropped, limp and defeated. When he looked at me again, his eyes were no longer just worried. They held something deeper, something sharp and unrelenting. Fear. And worse than that, doubt. That night, after Paul fell asleep, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection. The movement was back, a slow crawl beneath my ribs. I clutched at my stomach, fighting back a scream, and leaned over the sink. My breath hitched in short bursts, the stench of rot coiling in my nostrils like a living thing. Beneath my nail, something black and glistening began to push its way out. It wriggled briefly, then fell into the sink with a wet plop. My stomach twisted violently as I stared down at it, my fingers trembling as I reached out. It was a tiny, writhing worm. I recoiled, shoving it down the drain and turning on the water, watching the stream carry it away, but the pit in my stomach told me the truth I couldn't ignore. This wasn't the end. Something was alive inside me, and it was growing. I'd spent the night curled on the cold bathroom tiles, too ashamed, too broken, to face the bed, or him. My body wasn't mine anymore. It was something twisted and wrong. My hair was mostly gone, revealing blotchy, peeling skin stretched too thin over my scalp. My arms looked like empty husks, veins stark and winding like roots clawing for life. But it was the inside that truly betrayed me. The crawling, relentless movement beneath my skin, the writhing shapes that twisted in my stomach, my arms, my legs. I clawed at myself until my fingers were raw and bleeding, but no matter how much I tore, I couldn't reach them. Paul's voice broke through my haze.
"Kim, open the door, please."
I stared at my reflection in the mirror, a stranger staring back. No, not a stranger. A monster. "Go away!" The door burst open, slamming against the wall, and Paul stood there, his face pale, his eyes wide and disbelieving. His gaze darted over the sink, the bloodied tissues, the flakes of skin littering the floor, the stray strands of hair clinging to the counter, and then to me.
"Kim?"
His voice cracked, trembling with fear and something worse. Pity. I shook my head, barely able to meet his eyes. "Don't. Just don't." He didn't listen. He took a hesitant step forward, his hands trembling, his face twisting with desperation.
"You need help. We have to go to a doctor, or a hospital, or—"
"No!" I backed into the wall, my hands pressing against the cold tiles as if I could disappear into them. They can't fix this. No one can.
Please. I can't just watch you.
His voice gave out, and for a moment, the room was silent, except for the sound of my shallow, ragged breaths and his stifled sobs. Something snapped inside me then, a thread pulling tight and breaking all at once. I turned away from the mirror, my legs giving out as I collapsed onto the cold bathroom floor. The tiles pressed against my cheek, but all I could feel was the writhing inside me. Stronger now, more insistent. Paul was at my side in an instant, dropping to his knees. His hands hovered near me, trembling, unsure whether to touch me.
Talk to me.
My body convulsed violently, and I clawed at my stomach as nausea surged. It's inside me. I can feel it. It's... Before I could finish, my mouth opened against my will, a grotesque spasm forcing it wide. A thick, glistening mass pushed its way out, spilling onto the floor with a wet, nauseating splat. Black, writhing worms poured from my lips, their slick bodies squirming as they scattered across the tiles. Paul recoiled, stumbling back until he hit the wall. His hand flew to his mouth, his face contorted in horror. A gag escaped him. His chest heaved as his stomach rebelled, and he turned his head, retching violently into the corner. The sound of him choking filled the room, mixing with my raw, guttural screams and the sickening squelch of the worms writhing on the floor. Tears blurred my vision as more of the creatures forced their way out of my throat. My hands clawed at my neck, desperate to stop the torrent, but it was useless. The worms kept coming, each one dragging pieces of my sanity with it. Paul wiped his mouth with a trembling hand, his face pale and slick with sweat. He stared at me, his eyes wide with terror.
Oh, God.
As if the sight before him had stolen his ability to speak. When I finally lifted my head, the room was dead quiet. I heard the faint echo of the front door slamming, and the distant roar of his car peeling away. The silence that followed swallowed everything, broken only by my ragged breaths and the faint, wet squelch of the worms crawling across the floor. The crawling beneath my skin had stopped, replaced by a heavy, unbearable stillness. My body felt hollow now, stripped of everything that made it mine. The worms had taken what they needed, and their satisfaction hung in the air like a dark, oppressive weight. I was nothing more than a shell, barely human, barely alive. I steadied myself, gripping the edge of the sink and pulling myself to my feet. The room spun briefly, and my fingers trembled as I clung to the porcelain for support. I felt them, the worms crawling over my feet, their slimy bodies winding around my ankles, climbing higher with deliberate movements. A wave of nausea surged through me, but I didn't move. I turned my gaze to the mirror, forcing myself to face what I already knew. The reflection wasn't mine anymore. I reached up, my trembling fingers brushing my cheek. Beneath my touch, something squirmed, a faint, sickening wriggle beneath the skin. Maggots. It's over. You've won. My skin began to split, cracking open like an overripe fruit. The worms spilled out. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just let it happen. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. I was them now. And somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard Paul's voice. Or maybe it was the worms calling him back. They liked him. I could feel it. And we were still hungry.